Suzanne, honey, we've just been talking for an hour and now we're gonna have this conversation. I am so grateful to have you on. I brought you on because, well, one, I loved interviewing you 2 years ago when your menopause boot camp book came out, and so much has shifted for both of us in our own journeys, and in terms of your advocacy and how you're advocating for women out there. And I want to just kick off our conversation with sharing your perimenopause and menopause journey, if you're open to it.
Absolutely. I mean, so, listen, everybody's perimenopause and menopause journey is unique to them. I mean, there's obviously these events that occur that are universal, and there are many, many syndromes and symptoms and experiences that are universally experienced, but we do come into it with our own personal and health history. So the thing for me that was interesting was that I came into this part of my life both as a practicing conventional physician, and having had training in integrative medicine, holistic medicine, specifically Ayurveda, very interested in herbal medicine, herbalism, and a lot of lifestyle practices, right? Like I'd been a long-term yogi, a long-term fitness junkie, a long-term meditator. And then at 47, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I remember before I got there thinking, wow, with all of my background, I wonder what kind of decision making I will have around hormone therapy. Because at the time, we were still in the Post Women's Health Initiative phase. And even though, most of my colleagues and myself realized how absolutely flawed that study was, there wasn't a lot of good data that had filled in around it, let's say. And certainly, because of my holistic practices, I really wondered, honestly, am I going to put my money where my mouth is? Which is in retrospect, such a young thing to think, to be perfectly honest. It wasn't necessarily the most nuanced.
But I love that you were thinking about it in your 30s about how am I going to traverse and navigate this journey?
Yeah. I mean, I was already thinking about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that.
And then I got breast cancer and I was like, well, okay, I guess I know what I'm doing now. I'm not doing that. Because at the time, you definitely would not have treated with systemic hormone.
It was very contraindicated.
Absolutely. So I went through my treatment. I was very fortunate. I had an early stage, low grade, very treatable. But honestly, that's what 70 to 80% of us have. Estrogen and progesterone receptor positive, HER2 negative, stage 1, I was managed with a lumpectomy, this surgical procedure. I did not lose my entire breast, and that was my choice, and radiation. And then I took tamoxifen, which was an estrogen blocker. And it was very hard for me to take that because I had a lot of bad side effects, which of course now we understand. I mean, the estrogen blockers are blocking estrogen everywhere. I had terrible, I had frozen shoulder basically bilaterally. I could not take my sports bra off. And I was just not only unwilling to feel that kind of pain, but I worked out. I'm a surgeon. I was an obstetrician. I'm not going to do it. And here's the thing. I did do something. And this is where I think just my resilience, but also my practice has helped me. I remember being in that first MRI that I had to do. So I'd had the biopsy. It was positive. And they did an MRI to stage me. And that was terrifying.
It's terrifying.
You don't know, it's not just that the MRI is uncomfortable. I mean, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. I'm a grown up. It's terrifying. You don't know what information is going to come out. And I remember thinking for the 45 minutes that I had to be in there, I gave myself a mantra, which was, this is a thing that is happening to you. It's not who you are. It was very powerful. Those words were powerful. I was just determined. I was like, I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to make this who I am. Now, of course, 11 years later, it completely transformed who I was in many ways, but I never was willing to identify with that. That makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
And it does. I mean, knowing me now the way you know me too, my spiritual beliefs and things like that, it was very important to me. So I went through the tamoxifen. It took me probably almost 7.5 years to get through, 5 years. So yeah, it took me a while to get through my treatment. It took me longer than anticipated because, look, I had an amazing oncologist who was very, very supportive. And I had my own way that I needed to do things for myself. So that already set me up for a perimenopause that was not the average perimenopause.
Yes, that's a yes and like so many
Yeah,
of us, and we were talking about this, that many of us, yes, perimenopause is happening, and maybe we have an autoimmune condition. Yeah.
exactly.
Maybe we've got
Exactly.
a gut microbiome issue. Maybe we're already coming in with insulin resistance or polycystic ovarian syndrome, you know, that
Yeah,
it's never
exactly.
just it's on its own.
Well, exactly. That's right. And I think the thing is, and I think the important thing is, let me just tell this person I'm late. I think the important thing to remember also is that there isn't some prescribed way that any of this is going to happen. Like, when in your life does that ever happen? I think it's just another opportunity to dive into some resources or start identifying them, because you're about to head into a period of your life like no other. And I think lining up the support, including how you talk to yourself, is really, really important. So, I mean, look, the conversation that we're having now, 2 years after we initially met, is totally different. Not totally different, but I mean, the environment in which we're having it, and in the environment in which your followers are listening to this, is really different than even 2 years ago. So if I look at 10 years ago, and I was pretty resourced, I'm privileged, I'm educated, I'm a physician, I'm a women's health physician. And it was rough, but I did remember where I could draw strength. And I want people to remember that that's something, just that basic concept is something that we get to and can do at any time. There isn't one way to do this. There isn't a wrong way to do it. There isn't a right way to do it. You're right. We're going to come into this period of life like we do in any other period of our lives, whoever it is that we are. So what can we leverage right now?
Yeah, I love that. What are our non-negotiables for ourselves, for who we are? And I think a big part, what we were talking about, a non-negotiable for you was your spiritual practice, and even the mantra of you being in that MRI, of that clarity of this isn't going to define you. Like
Right.
this is something I'm gonna move through, I'm gonna heal from, and I'm gonna go to the next. There's these other future plans, this other bigger mission, and I get to honor my body in this process.
Exactly. Exactly. And I will tell you, I mean, I did that. It was hard. It was very hard to be vulnerable. It was hard to take time off of work, all these things. It was hard to figure out how to negotiate like my personal boundaries and my professional life. When somebody all of a sudden disappears from their job for 2 weeks, and people are kind of like, what's going on? So, and it all ended up being building character, right? Because, and I think then once I kind of, somebody, a writing teacher once said to me that you can't really necessarily perform or write from the wound, even though that might be the source. Once the scar has healed over, that's when you really have that strength. It's covered up enough that you can, and you're protected enough that you can come out and be more open, creative, whatever it is. And I think that's a great analogy, because I think when I was in it, I was really, really like protective and quiet and really just didn't want to talk about things. I needed to get through it. And over time, look, it's 11 years later, I talk very openly about that experience now, because it's good for me and it's good for you. It's good for you to hear how I got through a tough time. Is there something you can draw from that? And especially for my breast cancer community, I think it's very, very important. And I think, where we're talking so much about menopause, the breast cancer community often feels very left out of this, but things have changed quite a bit. And there are absolutely differences in the way we can manage our longevity and our health now and going forward. And in the time, like from the time that I conceived of, wrote the book, and published it, my thinking has evolved. My ideas have evolved. Um, I didn't think I would be able to use hormone therapy. I was already using vaginal estrogens. I knew that was safe, and that was important for my quality of life.
Despite the black box warning.
Really start with me. Did you, well, we just published,
Yes.
I don't know, for daily, but yeah, I think that's going to go away.
I absolutely think it's going to go away. I don't know when.
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's going to go away sooner than we think, because here's the thing. The conversation that is happening, the evolution that has occurred in this world really is having an impact. And actually, I think people should understand that the loud voices out there that are educated, that are listening to what you guys feel, think, need, we are advocating. And what's happening is that policy is being pushed. I mean, people that I work with, you know, there's a kind of a group of a loose association, a group of colleagues of ours that communicate with each other all the time. We call ourselves the Menopause. Some people love us, some people love to hate us, whatever. But there are people in that group, Rachel Rubin, Sharon Malone, who have been to the FDA, and are talking to the FDA about this. You know, there are people that are advocating for change in terms of looking at the data, Kelly Casperson, Mary Claire Haver, Vonda Wright. I'm going to leave people out, but people are actually making change. Jennifer Weiss Wolf, who's not a physician, she's a legal expert. She and I just published on this. She's been tirelessly working. So I could go on and on and on, but people need to know that your needs and your loud voices that are being expressed online, by what you're downloading, by what you're asking for, by what you're purchasing, by what you're investigating, it's actually having an impact.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to hear that, you know, because right now,
the wind.
yeah, right now, I mean, even women are still being turned down for vaginal estrogen, you know, post breast cancer. You know, and we were talking about early, 3 million women in the U.S. alone. You know, including yourself, and I love that you are speaking so openly about your own hormone replacement journey. You know, after having breast cancer and in the treatment of breast cancer, and how that is, I hope that it's really helping to support your quality of life.
Absolutely. So it started with that. And then I started to really investigate and understand and read more. And honestly, the watershed moment for me was reading Avram Blooming and Carol Tavris's book, Estrogen Matters. And when I saw the preponderance of data and the excellent science that really did not support withholding estrogen or hormone replacement therapy from breast cancer survivors like myself, I started hormone therapy. And I'd had this conversation over a long period of time, actually, with my physician, who I really respect and is very progressive, but I just really wasn't ready. And frankly, I wasn't, you know, now I wasn't having symptoms that were bad enough, but I got to a point where and I thought, oh, okay, I'm good. But as I shared with you, I had a very late menopause. I actually didn't hit menopause until a little less than a year ago at 57 and a half. So I am very blessed. I had a lot of extra estrogen on board for a much longer time than average. And so my symptoms weren't as bad, but in that last like year, 6 months to a year, it really started, the hot flashes, the night sweats specifically, the sleep disruption, and the brain fog. I was concerning to me. It was uncomfortable. I was started to really deeply understand. And I think I shared with you also, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, which is crazy to me because I'm a lifelong exerciser. I have been exercising consistently my entire adult life, including heavy weights. So I was like, what in the hell? And I thought, you know, I knew I had risk for diabetes, just family history. I understood what the information was. I understood what my benefits and risks were. And clearly I felt like the benefits outweighed the risks. But even then, it took me a while to be public about it. And not until my amazing colleague and friend, Corinne Mann, who is a menopause expert, OBGYN, and a breast cancer survivor, she and I were at a conference together, and she basically was like, let's just do an Instagram live right now and talk about it. And I was really nervous. I'm so public about things. I was so nervous about this. And the response was so overwhelming. People were so relieved to be reminded yet again that things evolve, things change. This needs to be personalized. We have to look at a combination of personal opinions about our own desires, agency, with a trusted practitioner, with science that changes, shared decision making, risks, benefits, alternatives. You know, again, I say this all the time. I've said it to you multiple times today. It's not informed consent if you don't have all the information. And I mean, it was just a really powerful moment for me and for community members. And actually, based on that, she and I decided we're going to be holding a retreat in June of 2025 on menopause for breast cancer survivors. And it's really going to be great because we've got that deeper toolkit, like my integrative medicine, my herbal medicine.
Obviously there's a lot of things that you're doing. It's a yes and as you were naming off, like we were talking about earlier, the four horsemen, right? Cancer, cardiometabolic disease, which again, cardiometabolic disease really trumps all of it.
Killer.
Number one, and more of us than men.
That's right.
Neurodegeneration, which is so scary. And
Alzheimer's affects us 2 to 3 times more than men on our age, and it's not because we're outliving them. It's not.
No, it's not because it's the reason. And then again, the diseases of frailty, right? Sarcopenia, the osteoporosis. So you're looking at all of those, and you're like, okay, yes, I'm going to do a lifestyle. Yes, and let's bring on hormones to help with some of the prevention of this as well, because we know that estradiol is obviously, along with the other hormones that we want to tend to, whether it's thyroid or insulin or cortisol or leptin, but estradiol, she's a major player here in these longevity concerns. And so I'm so grateful, because I know so many women understand that they deserve a higher quality of life, not only just in menopause, but post breast cancer, and that we've got to open the door for what is possible for them.
Yeah. And look, I've used many herbs over the years. I use them as a bridge for my patients. I use herbs regularly anyways, despite using hormones. It's, again, not either or. But at a certain point, that was the decision that I made for me. And again, these things are all very, very, look, on the one hand, they're intricate and complicated and miraculous. And it's like, how does any of it work? And you can get very overwhelmed teasing out the relationships. On the other hand, it's also very simple. It's like, what can you do that is practical today? Which includes taking a deep breath, calming down, and like making one step, because that in and of itself is going to slow you down. You got it. Otherwise you're going to have like not only decision fatigue, but you're just going to be overwhelmed and you're going to do nothing.
Yeah.
And then you're going to ruminate. Right. So I think some people are going to be very curious and want to know about how all these, how insulin and androgens interact and, all that kind of stuff. And some people are just going to be, no, what's the action?
How do I get rid of this belly fat? Come on, hook me up.
Right. Exactly. Like, tell me what to do. I mean, we wish it was that easy, but again, we want people to be educated so they can advocate for themselves, which includes advocating for stop the noise. You don't have to know everything.
Let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about advocacy. I know we were talking about this before too, because as I mentioned to you, particularly in the perimenopause continuum, which, oh my gosh, it feels like, honestly, I had an hour with my son this morning. That hour before summer camp felt like a lifetime. In the world of perimenopause, like it can be a decade easy for so many of us. And even how we start it is not how we're going to end it. And I find that, as you and I were saying, that it really kickstarts an acceleration of events. We will start to see bone loss there, or not as much remodeling. Maybe we start to see shifts in biomarkers in an abnormal direction towards cardiometabolic conditions. We just start to see things changing. And yet so often we find that so many women are trying desperately to advocate for themselves and really falling short, like not exactly sure how to have the conversation. And I know we were talking specifically about even the cardiometabolic risks. I was interviewing Dr. Carrie Jones, and she and I were talking about how hard we were fighting for an advanced cardiovascular panel in Peri. And I was having this really nuanced conversation because I'm very, very, again, privileged. We have great insurance because I have a 3-year-old who is literally carrying his bike down the stairs this morning. That was one of the conversations. Okay. And I'm like, this child is going to literally just tumble down all these stairs in about 5 seconds. And so if I can get my labs paid for from my primary, I'm going to do it, because I'm paying for it versus having to run them myself and I'm coming out of pocket. And so I'm having a conversation with her. I just wanted a more advanced panel. I wanted homocysteine. I wanted sed rate. I had this list, and she was like, you don't qualify for any of this. Like, your markers don't ask, like, they're not queuing me up for this. So it's going to be hard for me to make a case for you. And you're not old enough for any of this. And I was like, and so we were talking about, she and I having just an intellectual conversation around, stuff starts to shift right now. And like, the sooner I can start to have a timeline, I can get a great sense, especially with cardiovascular disease in my family, like big time. And so at the end of the day, she's like, I'll ask for them. We'll see what happens, and I knew I could run them by myself on my own, but I mean, we're talking about this for all my 15 minutes.
It's really, really, really challenging. And I think people just get overwhelmed probably hearing this because they don't even know what
Oh
they're
yeah.
asking for. And I think then there's that tension between like, look, well, you know, when you come into a doctor's office and you have a list of stuff that you saw on the podcast, you know, that may or may not go over very well with your personal physician. I think the way I would frame this for people, because you do have to advocate for yourself, especially as a woman. I have had to do that myself as a female physician who knows what she's talking about. I know what I don't know also. You know, I'm not my own primary care doc, but I know enough to know what I want investigated. And I have left doctors over this because I was frustrated. I was like, first of all, why do I have to keep asking for stuff? Like, why are you not offering it to a woman of a certain age? And I'm older. But I think educate yourself. Remember that you get more flies with honey than vinegar. You want to make this person your partner, unless you don't.
Unless you don't.
Right. I mean, there are some things you can do. So I have a couple of pages on how to advocate for yourself in my book, Menopause Bootcamp. I think a couple of things. If you're coming in for a primary care visit or a screening visit, preventative exam, and you think you're going to be able to go through a list 2 pages long, you're not. It's really not, especially if you're using insurance. Have some compassion. Your doctor is working very hard. They worked hard to get where they are. They really are intending to do the right thing by you. But if you're in a large hospital system or a big insurance-based group, they don't have a lot of time. They may not have the knowledge and they may not have the information or interest. You call, ask, can I make a separate appointment for XYZ? Is there someone in the practice who this is what they do? You know, like you do the groundwork. Come in prepared. What are your main goals? What are you partner with them? Ask them how to partner with them. If they're at that point dismissive, rude, disrespectful, maybe it is time to move on. That can be very, very challenging. Not everybody has access to care at all, let alone good care. But this is where telehealth can be beneficial to people. And, you know, a lot of times doctors, they really do want to help. I learned a lot early in my career from my patients. I didn't know about all these things, but I was like, oh, wait, I don't know anything. Listen, if you have a doctor who says, I don't know, that hang on to that doctor. That's a doctor who's got humility. I don't know. Let me look it up. Let's talk about it later. Let me get back to you on it. Let me ask a colleague. Oh my God, do not stay with that doctor because you're going to influence them and they're going to partner with you. And that happened to me early in my career. So I think you do have to take a lot of responsibility yourself. You do. And some of this stuff isn't going to get paid for by insurance. And some of it you're going to have to be super, super creative about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way we are right now. But the more we advocate for policy change, frankly, around women's health and studying these diseases in women and these conditions in women, the better off we're going to be. It may not affect us right now, but future generations. I mean, if you look at the confusion around, for instance, like fitness, diet, all these things, look, most of that data was not derived from women.
No. Yeah. Young. Yeah. Often men, definitely.
Yeah. So if you're confused and if you're like, I'm working so hard, I'm doing everything right and it's not working, well, but it really wasn't studied in you.
Yeah, it's so true.
The other thing that I find with a lot of my patients, especially because I'm here in Southern California, is that people are very lifestyle and health focused. And they often do come in to this period of life kind of like really understanding what they need to do. And it's very shocking to them that they're doing all these things and it's not working anymore. And it's like, well, things are changing. Like your cholesterol is not being shunted toward estradiol anymore. Like it's not you, it's you. You know what I mean? It's not like what you're doing. It's that you have got to change your mindset and understand that like nothing stays the same.
No, I always say, and this is not, I mean, I'm more being cheeky than anything, but like your body's changing without permission. Like I was like, how dare you? How dare you? Okay. You know, your muscle is changing without permission. The gut microbiome is changing. Estradiol is dropping. Like all these things are happening. And yeah, what worked for you, I don't know if it did or not in your 20s or 30s is definitely probably not going to be the same for your 40s.
Not usually.
Not usually.
No.
So we get to pivot. You know, we get to pivot.
Exactly. It's a new opportunity to try something different.
I just as a off the shoot question, but I just want to ask, just because I know you serve so many women in the perimenopause and menopause spectrum, what are some of your favorite herbs for us? Are some of them adaptogenic herbs? Are they, I'm
Yeah,
just
some of
curious.
them are. Some of them are. I will tell you that my top ones are more like very targeted toward sex storage, hormone stuff. So I love chasteberry Vitex. I love it. It works great for PMS and everything from honestly the mood to the physical symptoms. It probably has some impact on regulating cycle early in perimenopause because it looks like one of the things it does amongst others is help to increase your body's production of progesterone. So I love that one. And I personally used it a lot and I've used it very effectively with patients. I love Russian rhubarb. It's our ruponicum, which is basically a SERM. It's a selective estrogen receptor modulator, which is pretty interesting. So it's um, anti-estrogen in the breast and the uterus and pro-estrogen in places like the brain, which is why it's great for hot flashes, and probably in the bone. I mean, the data is a little bit it's not that it's mixed. It's like, look, let me just stop for a second. When we talk about herbal data, this is not powerful in the same way, sample size wise, as pharma. But so I'm always really honest about that. I focus on science, but also like, look, if you have a study with 200 or 300 people, you're very happy as opposed to,
Thousands.
4,000. So I just want to say that, but I love those a lot. Adaptogens, look, I
And
love
do you
rhodiola.
recommend cycling chasteberry too for specifically? I know some people recommend cycling, some people don't. So I was just curious.
I don't.
Okay.
I use it continuously. I
Okay,
found
cool.
it to be more effective. It's also easier. You have to look at human beings like, what can they do? Like if
Yeah.
we make it really complicated, when someone walks out of your office with 14 different things and 5 different, they're not going to do them. They're just not. Like it's complicated. Life is complicated. That's my belief. Excuse me. So chasteberry, I love that. I mean, the phytoestrogens I think are interesting, but these are the phytoestrogens that I like. I mean, ashwagandha is really, really interesting. I feel a little defensive or protective of ashwagandha because it's an Ayurvedic herb and it's not being used Ayurvedically. So I have to like let go, not be a control freak because Ayurvedic Ayurveda, we don't like take one herb and like that's an Ayurvedic.
You don't put it in your coffee, girl. You don't just put it in all the things.
No.
You don't make like a mushroom ashwagandha smoothie.
Astrology, essential with that right now too. I'm like, just breathe and just let people do what they're doing. But that's not Ayurveda. But ashwagandha is amazing in many, many ways and has a lot of really interesting impact on the brain that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be careful with ashwagandha. These are medicines, and there's actually some data on harm at a level that's too high. Rhodiola, I feel like gets overlooked and it's great for stress.
I am obsessed with rhodiola.
I love it too. And I'll tell you what I really, really am really into is I don't think there's enough data on these things yet. Depends. In the Chinese medicine literature, there is, but a lot of the functional mushrooms, many of which are adaptogens. So cordyceps, lion's mane, of course, reishi, maitake. And this is a whole other podcast, but I'm very interested in what's going to happen with psilocybin. I think the neuroplasticity impact on mood, trauma. I think a lot of women's health applications are going to be potentially forthcoming because things like chronic pelvic pain, endometriosis, PMS, PMDD, perimenopause, I'm just like, what's going to happen there?
Yeah. I mean, it's used in concussion protocols to lower, it was a consideration for me. I was still breastfeeding when I had my big concussions last summer. I ended up I did a lot of things, but that didn't end up making it into my protocol. But I read the research and it was really compelling.
Really interesting stuff on neuroplasticity. Like interesting. So, I mean, I could go, but look, can I tell you something? What I use the most probably in my backyard.
Yeah, I want to hear.
Oregano, marjoram. I make oil out of it. Look, I have this burn. I don't know if you can see it.
I can see the burn.
I do this all the time when I get into the groove and I'm cooking. I'm an Aquarian. I don't pay attention. So I burn myself all the time. And I have oregano oil that I make all the time. And we use it for everything. We use it because it is antiseptic and it is antipyretic. So it does help with pain. So there's like easy things people can do. It doesn't have to be fancy. So, I mean, I could go, I love an herb.
I love it. That's why I wanted to share because, especially women in perimenopause and menopause, I look at adaptogenic herbs, but also other herbs for helping to support metabolic health, mitochondrial health, blood sugar regulation.
I think that I mean, myo-inositol is not an herb; it's a micronutrient basically. But I mean, there's berberine is very interesting for cardiometabolic health. I mean, is it, you know, you could get yourself crazy with some of this stuff, but again, it's not like, oh, listen to this podcast, I want to lose weight, let me go get berberine. No, 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 that's not how this works. So, but I think as an adjunct, as a part of a program that is helping you with your relationship with yourself, which includes how we talk to ourselves about our body, with what we're eating, how we're eating, when we're eating, with our fitness, with our sleep, with our social connections, with our senses. I mean, that's as true holistic health.
It is. That is true holistic health. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where we're one, I mean, and
Yeah.
we're our own N of one. So, you get to figure out what's gonna work for you, where we really are a bio individual in that way. And yes, there's some solid pillars, around circadian rhythm optimization
Right.
and reducing stress and I mean sleep, very important, ladies. And things that we can do to support our mitochondria. Like I think that those, but again, it's figuring out
An understanding of really where the seat of our being and where our health is. Of course, now we're just catching up with the gut, right? But no matter what the issue was, it always started there. And that to me brings it home, to that grounded place of like, okay, because we can get really far afield and get way out there and tangential and up in our heads, and that doesn't help us at all. And it's like, okay, so how am I thinking? How am I sleeping? How am I eating? How am I digesting? We're not going to assimilate the 40,000 supplements you just bought if you're not even digesting it.
yeah.
Or
Or if your system is so wound up and vigilant and
right.
you shut that whole we don't have room. We don't have any we're in survival mode. We don't have space for digestion right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah.
I love this. One, we're gonna link to the book, but where can we find you? I feel like you're everywhere right now.
I mean, yeah, I kind of am. So I think social media, ask Dr. Suzanne. All my stuff is there, my website, which is linked there. And that's probably the best place to find me. Find me there, say hi to me. And I want to say, for people that feel connected to this information, the book came from my heart, and it came from my professional experience, people not having information, people not knowing where to turn, and not even understanding the language. I mean, menopause boot camps rose up, actual boot camps rose up because I knew people were overwhelmed and confused. And it was an opportunity to educate them so that they could go out into the world more empowered and more confident. And if it calls to you, do menopause boot camp certification. You can become certified to be a facilitator. This is not how to treat menopause. It's how to help other people be in menopause, an educated, empowered, communal, resourced space. And I created the certification program, not only because I can't be all places at all times, but also like everybody's community has their own way of talking to each other, has their own ethos, has their own story, has their own culture. And I'm not arrogant enough to think that I should come in as an expert. I can give you the tools and I can train you how to be a facilitator, and you get to run with it. So
I love that. I love it. And I love how to be, because at the end of the day, yeah, we can get the nuance of all the things to do, but in the day, it's life you're living.
that's right.
It's
That's right.
And like, how do we navigate that beautifully, and how can we get supported in that? I just love that. So I'll have the link to that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. You were so generous. So generous.
I got you. I got you. I got you. This was beautiful. I loved talking to you.